Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth and my colleagues on City Council. Welcome to our public work session. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Mr. Battle.
Here.
Mrs. Lucasberg. Here. Mr. Moody.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker.
Present.
Mr. Woodard.
Here.
Mayor Glover.
Here. City Manager Jones?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. The first presenter this evening will be Mr. Josh Peters of the National Automotive Parts Association, NAPA, which is an outsourced parts management system. He will provide a brief overview of that system. Next, the City Engineer, James Wright, will present a summary of the Capital Improvement Plan, CIP, and he will be followed by Mr. Richard Underhill from Public Utilities, who will provide an overview of the utilities overstructure. Ms. Terry, our Deputy City Manager, will follow with briefings of debt for the designated areas. And each presenter will follow respectively after the first. So, Mr. Peters, it's on you.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, welcome, Mr. Peters, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You have the floor.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Josh Peters. I'm with Genuine Parts Company. You may better know us as Napa Auto Parts. Genuine Parts Company is a $16 billion global corporation that specializes in supply chain, inventory management, warehouse distribution. Napa Auto Parts is the business unit that I represent. Motion Industries is another business unit that is underneath the Genuine Parts Company banner. I am here as a representative of Genuine Parts Company, the corporation. The local Napa Auto Parts stores are not a part of this presentation. They are independently owned in the Tidewater area. This is a corporate presentation. Napa Auto Parts has 26 years of what we call vendor-managed inventory business practices, where we work with municipalities and support municipal fleets in their inventory management practices. This sometimes is better known as outsourced inventory management, where Napa Auto Parts comes on site in your fleet parts room, sets up our proprietary computer systems, staffs the parts room with Napa Auto Parts employees, and begins business management practices to provide inventory for your entire fleet operation. This inventory does consist of both Napa branded parts and what we call non-Napa branded parts. This program is not designed to stock your shelves with Napa branded parts. I would say nationally, our ratio is 25 to 30% Napa, 70% non-Napa. My goal is to build a working inventory for your fleet that is tailored specifically to the vehicles that are on site. Napa doesn't provide all parts for all vehicles. For example, snowplow parts, Napa doesn't have a lot of parts for snowplow, but we have a lot of business partnerships, especially in the Tidewater area, that we work with to provide parts to put on your shelves. Why do municipalities get into vendor-managed inventory, and why do they choose to outsource to us? One of the greatest things that we provide for cities is increased fill rates. What does that mean? That means 85 to 90% of the time a technician comes to the parts counter that we are staffing, we will have that part in stock. It doesn't matter what the brand of the part is. I source from General Motors, I source from International, I source Napa parts. My goal is to get you out of the inventory management business and the risk and liability associated with owning that inventory and build a broad inventory to support your fleet. Contractually, I have an 85% fill rate that I will manage my business towards. So where today you may have an inventory value of $300,000, I might have an inventory value of $600,000 from multiple vendors in and around Portsmouth and the Tidewater area, including Napa branded parts. Obviously, if you have an increased inventory, you're going to boost technician efficiencies and productivities. You're going to get vehicles off the lift quicker. The citizens are going to have more vehicles on the road to support them. You're not going to have snowplow trucks down waiting on parts. I can't guarantee you that, but in our experience, our sourcing and our buying power allows us to work with multiple vendors, both locally, regionally, and nationally, to get parts on the shelf when we need them. I'd be remiss to say that we have 400 of these operations across the country, and some of the largest fleets in North America, including the city of New York City, city of Chicago. Here in Virginia, we are partnered with Roanoke, Norfolk, and the city of Richmond for multi-years. I think Richmond, I have a slide, but we're on 8 years, and Roanoke, we're on 15 years. So I'm excited to talk to you about this partnership because it truly is a partnership. There is buy-in from Mr. Stallings, from Fleet, from the key stakeholders on that side of the fence. But our business practices are going to take you out of that inventory management business and the risk and liability and make your technicians more efficient and more productive, and the citizens of Portsmouth are going to benefit from that. Some other, and I can go around the wheel. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. Controlling parts costs, obviously we put Napa branded parts on the shelf. We are going to reduce your cost of goods when it comes to utilizing Napa branded parts. We do have national contracts with OEM and manufacturers, such as tires. We are going to eliminate your inventory. Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We are going to eliminate your inventory investment. If you think about it from a capital investment standpoint, when I consult with governments, those parts on the shelf, those aren't parts. They're stacks of dollar bills, because those are investments that you all are making to support your fleet. Now you don't have any capital investment in those parts. You free up capital. Public Works frees up capital. There isn't any risk. There isn't any liability with obsolescence, with warranty cores, defects, or credits, with shrinkage. We own that responsibility to manage that business, and we're very good at it. Streamlining purchasing contract management. You have one PO, one invoice, once a month, fully reconciled from us. So the city knows exactly what they buy, when they buy it, and who bought it. There's no more reconciliation of hundreds of purchase orders. There's no more administration of a lot of paperwork that goes through the system to process a PO or to simply process an air filter or an oil filter that somebody needs. We handle all of that. We take care of all the paperwork. It's very simple. It's very transparent. It's very, very right there for everybody to see. Leveraging supplier buying power, as I mentioned, we have 400 of these operations across the country. We are partnered with some of the largest manufacturers in North America. They sell to us through this program. We will use Napa branded parts, but again, my goal is not to stock your shelves just with Napa. My goal is to work with other vendors in and around the area, and we'll talk about some of those partnerships that currently exist today. Administrative time, we talked a little bit about that. Purchasing, procurement, accounts payable, accounts receivable, it's going to lessen their burden because we're going to handle all of the administration and management of paperwork so that folks don't have to focus all of their time on chasing invoices, chasing purchase orders. Where is this part? Who ordered this part? Where does it come from? It's all consolidated. It's all right there. It's all managed efficiently. And improved parts availability. Working with Mr. Stallings and some of the folks in Fleet, we've heard some history on we don't have parts. Some of our vehicles are down. Police vehicles might be down. Snowplow parts might be down. I'm going to be contractually obligated to manage and report out on an 85% fill rate. 85% of the time your technician comes to the counter, that part will be in stock. And we will continue to build a working inventory to support that fleet. Questions? 26 years of experience. Napa's been around, obviously, for about 100 years. We've been in the vendor-managed inventory business for a little over 26 years. Increased productivity, lower investment cost, and again, supports fleets of any size. I have operations that are $200,000 to $300,000 a month in part spend. I have operations that are $50,000 a month in part spend. We have operations that are over $1 million a month in part spend. The key performance indicators and the benchmarking and the processes drive our efficiencies and drive our productivity. Our technology will integrate with the current technology in Fleet. There's a system called Faster. That is the Fleet Management Inventory System. Our system is called Hub, H-U-B. Both of those systems integrate. So when we populate Hub with parts information, your system's gonna pull that data and populate work orders automatically. It takes out the manual data entry that right now is not happening on a daily basis. We're gonna populate faster, so all parts are accounted for on every single work order.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Sir, Councilmember Moody has a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the presentation. Question on the existing inventory when you take over a municipality. Obviously, there's inventory that's already been purchased. How do you transition that?
So we have a very thorough transitioning process. To answer your question, we will buy your existing inventory. There's caveats to that. It has to be good working inventory with applicable sales history that we know it's good working inventory. My operations manager here, he's opened over 25 operations with me. We know what good working inventory is. We will buy your existing inventory, use that to prime the pump, so to speak, and then we'll build inventory off of that, and we'll either phase some of that inventory out and bring in new inventory per the direction of the key stakeholders in Public Works and Fleet, or we'll continue to min-max that inventory and repopulate and build from there.
Typically, how much on the dollar do you transition that?
Your book value. So if you paid $10, we give you $10.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Yep. And then along with that, we will barcode and scan all existing inventory so we know where it's at. If we don't buy inventory, just because it's obsolete to you, doesn't mean it's obsolete to us. It could be Napa inventory that no longer fits current vehicles in the fleet. We can flush that back through the system. So again, my goal is to get you out of the inventory management business and do what's right by the city in order to get you out of that. I don't want old stuff sitting around in the parts department either. So we're gonna flush as much as we can and take care of that existing inventory in the best manner possible.
Typically, obviously, parts, like everything else, increases in cost. How does your agreement work as far as the price increases?
So we operate, if we buy it Monday and it's $10, and we buy it Tuesday and it's $15, then the value in the computer system goes to $15. If it goes from 10 to 8, then the value in the computer system goes to 8. So whatever that price is on the current day that we buy that inventory is the price that is uploaded into the system, and it's just automatic and it's continuous.
So that's passed on as it increases?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
How cost-effective is it in reference to what we're doing now?
Well, I can tell you that on the Napa products, it's my estimate that when we're seeing this, we're seeing a potential cost reduction of 30 to 40%, where we can convert to a Napa part, because I know what your Napa costing is right now. For non-Napa parts, we have flashed some of our national contracts with some of your current contracts under state contract. We're seeing and I don't want to get into particular product lines, but we're seeing anywhere from 5 to 10% on some particular items. And then we also have current partnerships with some vendors in and around the Tidewater area because we're operational at Norfolk and Virginia. We're going to flash our current agreements with those vendors against what your price point is today. And if there's a cost savings, we will work with those vendors to obviously reduce your cost of goods accordingly because we already have partnerships and established price points. Does that answer your question, sir?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Go ahead, sir.
So as I mentioned, 400 of these operations across the country, and they do operate in the private sector as well. We're with Delta Airlines, this big entertainment park in Orlando called Walt Disney. We do all their mass transit buses. Southwest Airlines. So really, truly what this is it's asset management. It's vendor-managed inventory management. It's not really about Napa-branded parts. It's a core competency of Genuine Parts Company that manages millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of inventory around the world. And we source billions of dollars from manufacturers and suppliers around the world. And again, here in the Tidewater area, especially through our Norfolk contract, you can see some of the vendors that we're already partnered with. We have 110 suppliers that we're buying parts with just at the city of Norfolk. And I would say roughly about 30% of what we're selling in the city of Norfolk is a Napa branded part. The other 70% is through MWBE, through other small business, through other manufacturers and suppliers in the area. We're going to go out and find the best business partners that are going to do right by Public Works and that want to partner with us. We're going to clean up a lot of the area in the fleet parts department. We're going to clean up a lot of the area in the shop floors. We're going to get rid of some of the, what I call loose inventory that is not secured. We're going to consolidate. We're going to make it a very efficient run operation, and you get out of the inventory management business and that liability comes off your books. You buy what you need when you need it, and then we invoice you, and you get one invoice once a month fully reconciled. That is a executive summary, if you will. Yes, sir.
Is there a contract?
Yes, there is a contract, and Ms. Jones and Ms. Terry and I, we have talked about contracting opportunities, and I don't know, I think we've talked to procurement. I haven't specifically talked to procurement, but yeah, there is a contract.
Thank you.
Councilman Woodard, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you for the presentation as well. So from my understanding, you guys will be setting up your shelves, and will we purchasing or creating a PO when we take parts off the shelf, and you guys will be refilling the shelves, or will it be just dead stock that'll be sitting on the shelves?
No, so operationally, we physically come on site. There will be Napa employees working on site in the fleet parts room. We will have our computer system on site in the fleet parts department. So the shelving, there is existing shelving, and we're assessing whether or not we need to put more shelving, but we'll probably use the existing shelving that is there. Our goal, and as we ramp up in 30, 60, 90 days, is to have the right parts on the shelf from multiple manufacturers. We operate on what's called a min-max philosophy for parts management. So again, my ops manager will go through and we will start to set min-maxes on every single part that is in the system. And it could be hundreds, it could be thousands. And automatically through our proprietary network, our site manager who will be on site will know when to reorder and restock those shelves. We will get daily and nightly stock orders from Napa, from our Richmond, Virginia distribution center, every single day and every single night. And every single day, our on-site manager and potentially assistant manager will be ordering parts from various suppliers in and around the Tidewater area and nationally to repopulate those shelves. Your Public Works Department will no longer have the business responsibilities to do that on the day-to-day. It becomes our responsibility. And then, of course, we'll be reporting out to Public Works on our efficiency, our KPIs, our fill rates, our vehicles down because of parts, when our parts come. I mean, there's a multitude of data and information that we'll be able to give the Public Works Department as to the status of a particular part or a work order or a vehicle.
Right. So what you're saying is that your computer system or your team would create would create a velocity of which parts are needed or which parts are used the most.
Yes.
And you guys will stock it accordingly.
Yeah, because, I mean, we have the experience with police, with school bus, with sanitation, with fire. We're operational in Washington, D.C. at FEMS, Fire and Emergency Management Services. It's all fire trucks and ambulances. We know what parts are failing, so we have historical data to guide us to create stock orders with certain suppliers. There is some information in Public Works and the current parts department that will allow us to, I guess you could say, stock up on day one. We've got historical data and we've got knowledge of what it is we need to put on the shelf, and then our computer system will guide us from there, if you will.
Right. And I know your company distribute parts, so these are dedicated parts for our city, our municipality. These won't be outsourced if someone in the neighboring city needs an engine or whatever.
Yeah, this
Car part.
operation is 100% dedicated to the city of Portsmouth. The parts people are dedicated, the inventory is dedicated. You're not paying for the Napa NASCAR, you're not paying for, the Napa online, the Napa marketing. This is a pure business partnership between Genuine Parts Company and the city.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lucasberg, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Peters, for the presentation. And I guess my question is, I guess you said that the city won't have to worry about our employees stocking the shelves, but that doesn't take anyone out of employment. It just kind of offers, like a tool, some additional assistance for them to be able to effectively perform.
That, the key stakeholders in Public Works should answer that question.
Okay.
I'll address that.
Okay, and I guess one more question before you, with the contracting, I guess you'll look at, and it may be the city manager as well, but you'll take a look at our fleet and determine what we need currently, or is it just a blanket contract that offers, not generic Napa parts for what you believe may be needed futuristically or based on the year of the vehicle, or
Yeah,
how is that determined?
in the procurement world, this contract is actually considered a service contract, not a parts contract.
Okay.
So it's not a commodities contract or a parts contract. It truly is an inventory management contract where we provide a service. The parts side of it are whoever or whatever we source from. And I'll say this, if Fleet told us we don't want any Napa parts on the shelf, we wouldn't put Napa parts on the shelf. Our goal is to stock what Fleet needs, what Public Works needs, what police needs in order to have their vehicles off the racks as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So it's a collaboration between Public Works, Fleet, and Napa, Genuine Parts Company, to build that working inventory, and it'll be ever-changing. There's seasonality. You're going to go from Ford to General Motors. You're going to go from different fire trucks every single year. So it's always an evolving inventory, but it is considered a service contract.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the question about city manager.
Yes, this is an opportune time
ahead,
to
ma'am.
do this at this time because we have a number of vacancies. So no employee will lose their job. We have already identified repurposing of those employees.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
Is this strictly fleet-driven?
No. Our services extend into facilities management, MRO. I say this tongue-in-cheek. We're at a chicken processing plant in Green Bay, Wisconsin, because a private owner doesn't want to own the inventory for his machinery. So it really is about asset management. We manage materials and supplies and office products, facilities, janitorial. Yes, sir.
Infrastructure?
To a certain extent, yes. And some of our DOT contracts, we handle, the road signs, we handle piping, we handle, if it has a part number or a part number, a cost, and a supplier, I can manage it. And I can manage that and work with the different suppliers because, again, our system allows us to source globally from anybody. In Chicago, we manage the mass transit system for Chicago, the L. We have crate engines stacked to a ceiling that are $800,000 a piece that are only manufactured in France. So when you get down to it, it's what is the scope of services that we can define, and the products become the products.
Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
Yes, this question is for the city manager. Is this service contract the result of an RFP?
We have not gotten to that point yet.
So are we contracted with IBS?
No.
Okay, so,
This is for information to look at how we're looking at public-private partnerships to go forth and reduce costs and improve our effectiveness and efficiency.
so we have a vendor presenting to us before an RFP has been,
We don't need an RFP for this. This is
so it's not going out to RFP?
No.
So how are we selecting the vendor?
I will provide a report back and determine and to show you how we arrived at this point.
Okay, it was mentioned about the 30 to 40% cost savings and for Napa parts and non-Napa parts 5 to 10%. So what is the actual dollar figure savings?
We're estimating $800,000.
All right. And, well, the other question dealt with the contract, but there is no
And
contract.
based on the fact that this is a co-op agreement, that's how we're working, because they're benefiting us in a service that we need to provide where we have deficiencies. So we've defined it under those terms. And I'll let Deputy City Manager Mimi Terry add to that if there's something else that she feels she needs to add as to how we got to this point.
So you're saying that since it's a, what is that, a co-op agreement through the state, or what are you speaking of?
I'll let Mimi Terry address that. She has more specifics.
Good evening. This is a cooperative agreement that we would consider. We used it in the city when I worked for the city of Norfolk as well as the city of Richmond. And so basically, we would look at the agreements that they have in place that have already been vetted out through an RFP process through both of those localities. And from there, we would make our own terms and conditions with the vendor to determine next steps.
Is this part of a larger state contract?
It's a larger, a cooperative agreement is pretty much where the vendor, well, the city has already gone through all of the steps to an RFP, to a bid process and everything. And what they do is says, hey, we vetted out all of the terms and conditions. This contractor has a contract through, say, 2025. So you're allowed to use it. I hate to say piggyback, but that's basically what a cooperative agreement is.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. James, right?
Welcome, sir. You have the floor, Mr. Wright.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight, I'm going to give you an overview of the capital improvement program and briefly touch on some of the competing priorities in the CIP. So, capital improvement programs. CIP plan provides a working blueprint for sustaining and improving a community's infrastructure. The plan is intended to coordinate strategic planning, financial capacity, and physical development. The plan may include major studies, planning efforts, significant maintenance, and construction activities, and equipment and land acquisition. So this is a quick glance at the City of Portsmouth infrastructure. As you can see, water and sewer system, over 75% of the system is 80-plus years old. Stormwater conveyance, over 75% of the system is 70-plus years old. A number of the critical facilities for water, sanitary sewer, and storm drain were placed into service prior to 1945. You're looking at transmission mains that take water from the treatment plant. You're looking at several large box culverts taking water from the downtown area out to the river. Bridges, average age is 52 years old, 2 of which are over 7 years old. That would be the Churchill Bridge that's currently being replaced and the Paradise Creek Bridge over Victory Boulevard right there that is going out for bid sometime here in the fall. Garages are, their average age is 35 years old. We have 6 garages, 2 of which are 20 years or younger. That would be Middle Street and Renaissance. The other garages are significantly older. The buildings, approximately 50% of the buildings are nearing or exceeding 50 years old. And on top of that, a number of the buildings had other lives prior to their current uses. Just one that comes to mind just really quick is a neighborhood facility. It used to be an old armory. Right now it's a recreation center. Similarly, Port Norfolk Recreation Center had 2 previous lives before its current use. So we have a number of buildings that have been repurposed in their existing use. The programming does not fit the use. Some of the factors that impact our infrastructure, as you look, you see the annexation, number of annexations that the city's gone through as it's grown from its small inner downtown core out towards Churchland. Just in a broader way to look at this, if you move from downtown out towards Churchland, you'll see the makeup of the city changes, how the infrastructure looks and feels, similar as you go from east to west. Downtown neighborhoods look significantly different than neighborhoods in Churchland. Neighborhoods downtown also look significantly different than areas, say, like Hodges Manor or Simonsdale. From looking at those annexations, they happen during different periods, so the rules for infrastructure potentially changed as these areas are being added, modified, or built onto. Then design standards, they change substantially yearly, sometimes. Building code changes every 3 years. ASHTO, FHWA, they look at their standards periodically and update. DEQ does the same, as well as the DCR. Updated design standards provide for new technologies, materials and methods, as well as better approaches to incorporate health and safety into the new systems that are designed. So our capital improvement plan has 9 broad categories that you see here. So just to touch on some of the things that are in each category. So public utilities is going to be water and sewer, consists of projects associated with the water supply and dams, water treatment plant, transmission mains, distribution system, sanitary sewer pump stations, and sanitary sewer collections. And some of the type of projects you might see in the CIP category are pump station rehabilitation and water transmission main relocations. Drainage and street improvements, traffic signal operations and intersection improvements, bridge replacements and rehabilitations, pedestrian improvements, stormwater management, drainage rehabilitation and replacement. Some of the projects that may be associated with this category: Churchland Bridge replacement, Old Town Stormwater Pump Station, rail to trail, and traffic signal upgrades. Education, this category is completely dedicated to the schools. Consists of roof replacements, HVAC upgrades, athletic field rehabilitation, ADA bathroom upgrades, classroom renovations, gym renovations and additions, and proposed new schools. And you see the list of the type of projects that can be found under this category. Development, this formula, if you look in your CIP book, economic development category, consists of projects associated with economic development activity, such as demolition of buildings, city gateways, and resiliency planning. Leisure services, these are projects associated with parks and recreation. Some of the projects that we've discussed: Charles Pete Little League improvements, lighting upgrades at Churchland Soccer Complex, and enhancements for Cavalier Manor Recreation Center and Sportsplex facilities. Municipal facilities is sort of the catch-all for all those other types of things that we do: building rehabilitation and ADA upgrades, HVAC upgrades, roof replacements, seawall repairs and replacements, IT system and software upgrades, pavilion upgrades, and cemetery upgrades. Some of the projects that are under this category: Public Works Building, homeless shelter, cemetery upgrades, potential new city hall, new public safety building, and relocation of the jail. Under the Parking Authority, projects associated with the maintenance and rehabilitation of parking facilities. That'd be parking garages and the surface parking lots. And some of the projects are similar to the garage repairs, safety upgrades, and County Street garage replacement. Fleet management deals with replacing and maintaining the fleet for both the city and the schools. And here are some of the criteria when we're looking at CIP projects. So public safety and consequence of failure, looking at projects that go to address infrastructure that presents a potential hazard or leaves a dangerous condition. We need to comply with the regulatory mandate, such as ADA compliance, new dam safety regulations, or consent decrees for sanitary sewer. Public benefit development, any technology upgrades that we would do to upgrade our business practices, say like new permitting software, to give us that seamless public interface for developers when they're doing business with the city. Compatibility with the city comprehensive plan or other city plans, any multimodal corridor improvements, pedestrian enhancements, or resiliency efforts. Looking at projects that impact CIP and operating costs, whether to get a brand new facility, whether to just do repairs, rehabilitate, or to replace it. And what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to rehabilitate because it's beyond repair, or replace it totally because it can't be rehabilitated? And then what do those costs mean as far as your operating budget when you're looking at both budgets compared, CIP and operating? And then is there a funding source identified? Are there funds available like in stormwater or public utilities with dedicated funding source? Is there grant funding out there for it? Majority of our road projects use state and federal funds. Are there other funding sources out there, say like Virginia revolving loan funds or FEMA grants like we're using for the stormwater pump station? And over the past year or so, in different conversations with City Council, these are some of the projects that have popped up. Some you see there with the schools, some are on the city side. And as we go through the budget process, these discussions will come out, and these projects will be fleshed out more as council makes decisions about which projects to move forward and how to move forward with them. But the CIP funding sources for the CIP overall, there's transfer from the general fund, there's bonds. As I mentioned, for those road projects, the state and federal funds through VDOT or FHWA. There's CDBG funds. There are ARPA funds under consideration right now, both city and school side. There's other grants, partnerships, and the stormwater utility and the utility with public utilities, their fees generate. And for this slide, turn this slide over to Ms. Terry.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
What is general government debt affordability?
That's me.
Oh.
So, good evening, council. Good evening, mayor. So I just wanted to bring this to affordability because these are what we govern ourselves by as it relates to debt for the city of Portsmouth. When we have our budget one-on-one sessions, we go more and we get more involved to be able to talk about debt so you'll know where we stand as a city. So city adopted affordability policies. Right now we have a policy that says the ratio of debt service toward the general fund cannot exceed 10%. Your debt to market value ratio cannot exceed 4%, and that is what the debt rate is toward your taxable assessments, real estate. A 10-year debt payoff, you want to be greater than 50%. So those are our policies. So as it relates to debt, and the reason I thought this was valuable is because we are often asked, can we go into additional debt to fund some of these projects? So what I wanted to do is give you a snapshot as to where we are currently. And then if there were a concern or a question of can we add additional debt, you will know at a point in time where we are. So as of June 30th point in time, we had GO bonds, and those are your general obligation bonds, which are different. And so they are $412 million. Your general government ratio is 9%, where we are not to exceed 10. Your debt service market ratio is 3.5%. So what I did was I included to show excluding pension bonds, because we are the only locality that has pension bonds, and that was for retirement. That, of course, we paid into so that every retiree could definitely receive a paycheck or a retirement check. And again, as council says, they would do it again and again and again to make sure that our employees were taken care of. 5% including pension bonds. So when we add pension bonds back to the debt ratio, we're at 5% of our 4% policy. New debt service. So on $42 million, if you said, hey, we need an additional $42 million to complete some of these projects, that annual payment would be $3.5 to $4 million, depending on the interest rate and the environment that we're in for the market. The reason I think that is important, because you'll know for every year that you request debt, you're going to have to make a payment. So there has to be dollars allocated for those new payments as it relates to debt. You have a 10-year debt ratio, again, at 50%. We tend to pay off our debt a little faster. So here we are. We're at 60% better than policy. Any questions for me?
Councilwoman Lucas-Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Terry, how do we get back to a 4% rule? We are at, you said 5% on our pension bonds. I mean, is this something we need to be aggressively working on now, or are we got a little wiggle room?
So the beautiful part is that we tend to refinance. Remember, we did a refinance a year or so ago, and we were able to reflect the significant savings. So when we do refinances, we actually pay the bonds down, we get a better interest rate, and it allows us to do a little more spending.
Couple of questions, ma'am, if you may. So help me understand. So our debt limit, because you have a debt limit, our debt limit where we need to be in compliance with is I guess, so we have an opportunity, 10% of our assessed value is about $700 million, somewhere around there, correct?
Correct.
So with $700 million, and I'm looking at 412 in GO bonds, we've already, based on what the paper says, we've already exceeded our policy of 4%, is that correct?
Right, you're at the market, the 4% debt value is based on real estate, and we're at 3.5 if we exclude
The pension bond.
pension bonds, but again, a payment
It's
is
real
a payment,
debt.
it's
Right,
debt
I mean,
is
it's
debt.
debt, yes. So right now, in basic terms, I'm not that smart, but we would be almost underwater in that situation
Correct.
as it relates to where we are in terms of our debt and our debt capacity.
Right, for the general government.
Okay. Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you for the presentation. It's sobering information. What are some of the ramifications of exceeding our limit?
That becomes city policy. So your credit rating will go down. Right now, we're at AA, and so it does affect your credit rating and your ability to borrow and to have a reduction in your interest rate.
And what would a reduction in our credit rating mean? Just
Higher,
ballpark?
higher payments, a harder time borrowing money, and it just like anything else with a bad credit score, you're going to have the impact of higher everything, higher payments, higher interest, and a hard time trying to afford the loan.
So we're kind of pushing that bubble right now.
We're under a microscope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor, and then Councilman Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor.
So at $750 million, which is a round figure of our annual revenue, what are our borrowed expenditures, and how do they equate to the numbers in the borrowing funds if we needed to in the future?
Oh, if I understand what you're asking, and stop me if I'm wrong.
Well, you want me to tell you again?
Yeah.
Okay. Hypothetically, we do about $750 million a year. Where we stand right now with our borrowing from the past, where do we stand? And at that position, what borrowing power do we have as of this date?
So in your general fund, you have 247, about 259 million in revenue. In general, and we're only talking general fund. And I'll come back when it comes time to talk about revenue bonds, but just for GO bond purposes. Okay, so remember, we are receiving money based on the tax base. So those are how our dollars. So, and that's no new revenue. So if you're asking how much money, I guess I'm not understanding what you're really asking. What I will say is, based on the revenue that we have, your expenditures, of course, we have to do a balanced budget. And that's budget standard practices. So you have your general fund revenues are based on, or I guess I don't understand what you're asking me.
I think he's asking for what is our current debt service now?
Oh,
And our power to borrow with it where it is.
It's basically determining what we can afford at this point.
okay.
Based on the level of revenues we receive, based on our spending, what is our debt service, and how much does that equate to in additional debt?
And I don't want to speak out of term because I have to go back and pull the exact number.
Yes, ma'am.
But just based on the calculation I did, based on the assessment, based on what we could do, I think our debt limit was, I don't want to speak out of term.
Yes, ma'am.
And then, is that something I can report back
Yeah,
to
yes.
council?
Yes, ma'am, that would be real nice.
Okay.
That way we would know where we are and what we have the ability to do henceforth.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Whitaker.
Just,
sir,
just
you have the
for
floor.
clarification, the general government ratio that you have currently at 9%, that's on the, is that in reference to the GO bonds?
Yes.
Okay, so over here to the left, where it talks about the ratio of debt service to general fund not to exceed 10%, those are two different
Right.
issues.
Yeah, all three are different. So
Right.
you have your debt ratio to the general fund. You're looking at how many dollars you have, and then you base that percentage on 10%. So you cannot exceed that limit.
Okay, right.
So that's where we're at 9%.
Right, so these limits, are they given to us or advised to us by our financial advisors, or is that something that council comes up with just as pure policy? And if that's changed, what's the implications of that?
So again, that's the city council policy.
Okay.
So if that changes, what I would recommend is we look at where we are. Changing how much you can borrow doesn't change how much you can afford
Right,
to spend.
right, I see what you're saying. So, but by changing our policy, does that impact on any type of credit rating?
Right, because what credit companies, agencies are looking at is the affordability. Can you afford the debt, and why are you in so much debt? Are you not using the revenue that you have to be able to finance the projects that are appropriated or approved? So if you keep adding on projects and you don't have the funding and you start reducing how much your savings are, that's no longer your cushion, and they're looking at it as you can't afford it. So again, that's the affordability. Just like you would a house, you can buy a house and they can say your credit can sustain a $2 million house, but you know if you make that payment, you're gonna be house poor and you're really gonna be out in a year.
Right. Also, are we going to get the CIP breakdown as we have in the past, showing us projects that we currently have and the priority of those projects? And I know last year I thought we had a printout that itemized our CIP.
Right, and remember, that came along the time that we had our one-on-one budget discussions,
Right.
because we were able to present those to you independently.
Right.
And then we could prioritize based on what council's recommendation was.
Okay.
And then we did the final presentation, and that became adopted.
Right, okay, so next week, the CIP budget will not be part of the presentation?
Yes.
It will be?
Okay, so we present the budget as we have based on what council has recommended so far. And what happens is that's our presentation to council. Council comes back with their recommendations after we meet one-on-one. And based on that, after that conversation and after we meet collectively, the determination is whether we move forward. You adopt it but we work those kinks out during the budget time.
Right, so the CIP you present next week is just where we are now?
Right.
Okay.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it would be good when we get into those discussions. I know a few years ago, we had a facilities report showing the deferred maintenance on each of them and the estimated cost of addressing the maintenance. So I think that Mr. Wright may remember that report. I think it was a good view of what needs to be done, and from that list, as I recall, we prioritized it. So if we could get something similar to that as a guideline on where we stand on the deferred maintenance, I think that would be good.
Yes, sir. I think the intent at the city manager's direction is to provide a comprehensive list of all our infrastructure needs, schools, city buildings, water, sewer, and everything as far as what those needs are. So council has a complete view of what the entire needs are for the city in terms of CIP.
One other question, Mayor, Mr. Wright. The Churchland Bridge project, that seems to be going slow. Have they run into any issues with that, or is it just on schedule?
They've had a few COVID issues, as a lot of contractors have, working in close quarters as such, then having to follow protocols for if a crew is in close quarters, one of the crews comes down, then the whole crew is out for a period of time. But as far as time, they're pretty much on schedule, all things considered, and so they'll be able to open the new bridge in approximately close to the date it's supposed to open.
And what's that
As
date?
all schedule goes, you lag here, you pick up, and then it's a flux throughout the entire process.
And what was that date?
It's next year, March towards the end of March, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Wright.
Councilwoman Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I guess my question, I know that council, we're going to get one-on-ones with you, and we'll go over our CIP preferred list, but do we look at it as like the squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of a thing? Because I know Mr. Wright presented that some of our projects were 50 years old and 60 and 70 and 80 years old. We might want something, but do we have to look at a priority on what needs to go first or what needs to be considered, even though we might want some other options on our bucket list?
So, as I understand it from the city manager, and she's going to let me know if I misstep here, when you get the list that's going to be presented to you, it's going to have those things, some of those criteria assigned to each one of them. So, for instance, and it's easy to talk about the bridge because it's under construction, so I don't think I'm going to miss anything. So the Churchland Bridge was at the point where you couldn't repair it, you couldn't rehabilitate it anymore, it needed to be replaced. We took the time to work with our partners at the state to get state funds to add to the city funds to move forward with that project. You'll get that similar information for all the projects. So the project, once again, so not to misstep, stormwater pump station, started off with stormwater utility funds. We went out and got a grant so we could proceed to construction. It's going to address major flooding in the downtown, Old Town area. And so for each one of the projects that you'll see, you'll get something similar as the project, the description, how it complies with those categories, if there is funding on it or potential funding and so forth. So council gets the complete picture of each project and where it falls when you get your list.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Dr. Whitaker,
Yeah.
so you have the floor.
Yeah, Ms. Terry, let me make sure that I'm correlating the question correctly with what I asked you earlier. The general obligation bond, 412 million, and this 9% figure, were you saying that the 412 and this general government ratio correlate, are associated with each other?
No,
Okay, that's, yeah, so what is this 9%?
so your 9% is the current ratio. If you take what you have in general fund revenue, or what you have in the general fund, you cannot exceed that with a certain amount of debt.
So the 9% is the general fund to total debt?
Right.
Not, well, when you
Government.
when you said total debt, are you talking about what are you considering total debt?
Everything we have a loan for. Everything that you owe money, everything that you have a loan for, everything that you can look at liabilities as well. You're talking about notes payable, you're talking about compensated absences, you're talking about everything as it relates to debt or what you owe out.
So paying back a bond obligation, that's not considered debt.
Yes.
So,
I think there are three things here. You have your general government ratio,
Right.
which is all of your general government debt as it relates to how much you actually, your budget. The best way to say that is debt to budget, okay? Then you have your debt service ratio. That is your assessment value toward your debt, because you're only allowed 4% of that.
okay, hold on. So let me make sure let me make sure I'm following on the total debt. So for the total debt, you have your general obligation bond, your revenue bond, and then what's the other?
No, revenue bonds are separate because
They're
they are
not part
based
of the
on rate.
So they're not part of the total debt calculation?
Right, that's why it's general government ratio.
Okay. So what I'm trying to find, what makes up that total debt?
Everything you owe
Except-
out as far as general government. Take out utilities because
Okay.
that's business type. We're talking general government. So you're talking about all of your GO bonds, your general obligation bonds. You're talking about any parking authority. Don't forget you have that. You have your garages that are part of that. You have golf that's a part of your debt because you've taken out loans for that. You have other smaller loans that are part of this. Whether those dollars were used in some capacity, we have the obligation to pay it as general government.
Okay, all right. And then based on that calculation, we cannot exceed,
Based on your policy.
right, we can't, right. And so what is that cap?
780.
No, I mean the rates, the percent,
10%.
10%, okay. Thank you.
Good.
Because the reason I was asking too, because I was confused in the debt service general fund 10%, but those are
Yeah,
two
and
different things.
it can be confusing because there are three different policies that guide. That's why I tried to put it on the side to kind of push me toward it. But again, when we go into one-on-ones, that's when I can really talk about debt. And I think that's when it becomes more apparent of where we are, because you can ask real specific questions and we can follow it like that.
Okay.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Getting back to the revenue bonds, obviously, the revenue stream is supposed to take care of the debt. When that doesn't, that's counted as a debt. Is that correct?
Correct. And in the second presentation, I'll come back and talk about the revenue bonds.
And the golf fund came to mind when you mentioned the golf courses.
Yes.
Because they were financed with revenue bonds, and we're
Yep.
still subsidizing that to a great extent. So, thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you for that presentation.
Next, we have Rick Underhill from Department of Public Utilities.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask him a question?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle has a question.
Well,
Come forward, sir.
okay.
Please.
Well, actually,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say to you that I am absent of political rhetoric. I don't have it, but I like to say thank you because I know what you do for this city, how you keep that lead out of that water, how you know all of the workings of the agency that you're in, and you need thanks because you're very deserving. Thank you.
We appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. again-
Welcome, sir. You have the floor.
Okay, council members, mayor.
Excuse me for a minute. I need to step away, but you can continue, okay?
Okay, I will. What I'm going to do here this evening for you is I'm going to give you an overview of our water and sewer systems briefly. I'm going to talk about some of the problems that we're seeing in the sewer side and what we're doing to fix those problems as we move ahead, and some of the things we're looking at in terms of funding sources, that sort of thing, to do that. With me tonight is George Wojcik. George is our special projects manager in the city. He is helping me with repairs that are now being made to some of our sewage pump stations. The water system, this is a water plant in Suffolk. We call it the Lake Kilby plant. It gets water from four reservoirs that are in the city of Suffolk and a piece of Isle of Wight County. We also have 5 wells, deep groundwater wells, that are supplemental sources should we need them. One of the wells is being used to provide fluoride so that we don't have to buy fluoride, which goes into the water system to protect your teeth. We just did a major investment in the Lake Kilby treatment plant to the tune of about, in excess of $30 million. That is winding down. Good thing to report here is the Lake Kilby water treatment plant is good to go. It's in great shape for a number of years to follow. How do we get the water to Portsmouth? Well, you can see the plant there is there, it says Lake Kilby Water Treatment Plant. We have 400 miles of transmission and distribution mains. You can see the transmission mains stretching from the water plant into the older section of Portsmouth, and then water transmission mains stretching out into the Churchland area. Those are the 2 primary ways that we get water into the city, and those parts of the city system are connected. We have 3 elevated storage tanks, 2 ground storage tanks, 2,500 fire hydrants, and about 32,000 meters. That's the number of customers that we have, both residential and commercial. The sewer system, 370 miles of gravity sewers, 50 miles of pressure mains. These are the force mains. 67 pump stations, sewage pump stations, 22 vacuum wells. I'll explain that again here in a minute, and 6,700 manholes. I will tell you one thing. 20 years ago, I was a consultant to the city Public Utilities Department. We did a very comprehensive assessment of the condition of the sewer system at that time, both the gravity sewers, pump stations, and force mains. A couple of things we noted was that the system is old and getting older. The materials that were constructed back in the day are getting older and starting to deteriorate. The equipment in the pump stations, we're doing the same thing. What we had recommended at the time was a significant investment into the sewer system to bring the system life back up so it could last another 50 years. Now, there has been some investment that's occurred over the years, but it hasn't caught up, okay? So what's happening now is a lot of that stuff that we thought about 20 years ago is starting to come together now. We're seeing more failures, and we're doing the best we can to fix those things as they happen. And more recently, if you see those orange dots there, or flags, those are the pump stations that we're currently working on that have failures that are causing us problems out there in the system, overflows and that sort of thing. Those colored areas there, different colors, are our vacuum sewer areas. You can see the vacuum sewer systems, there's 5 of them. They serve a significant amount of the older Portsmouth system. That diagram on the right shows what we have. We have gravity sewers that dump into wells, suction lines that run back to the vacuum station, which discharges into the regional force main system. Unfortunately, back in December, we started having a tsunami of vacuum station failures, starting with, is this working? Oh. Well, when you know it doesn't work. Let's go back. It was working. At any rate, so if you look at the yellow station, the lighter yellow in the bottom, the green in the middle, and the purple to the left there, those are our 3 pump stations that have failed. They all failed within a matter of weeks of each other. They've been failing off and on ever since December, which has been causing us significant problems. But the council was nice enough to grant us $3 million to spend to start working on these stations to fix them. And we are actively buying parts. Some delays, as you all know, there's a lot of delays in parts, but we got those coming. As a matter of fact, some of those parts have already been put in the pump stations. We've hired contractors to help us. And the other thing that we're doing too with that money is we are buying spare parts to put away so that when something might fail a year, 2 years from now, we won't have to wait for it. We go get it off the shelf and we put it in there. So we're buying for the future with some of that money too. Now, what's happening? This is the good thing. We are seeing since December, January, February, March, we're seeing an improvement in the system from the things that we're doing out there, and it's only going to get better. Improvement in the system, a couple things here. Overflows are going down. We're not having to pump and haul, which is very expensive, out of the manholes. And the most significant thing is the people that are complaining about overflows, things running in their streets and that sort of thing, are starting to drop. So we're seeing some benefit from what we're having to do. It's not going to be tomorrow. I would say that we've got 2 pump stations of the 3 up running right now. We're going to do more to keep them more reliably running. We have one, the last one, Clifford Street, the purple area there. That'll be up and running by the end of next week. And then we'll concentrate on increasing the efficiency of those stations over the next couple of months as the parts come in and we get our suppliers out there and our contractors to install them. So along with that, we've got a number of conventional pump stations, about 15 of them that are having problems. Either there were pumps are gone, controls are gone, or whatever, a combination of those. We are also addressing those with some of the ARPA money that we were granted, and whatever money that we have left over in our operating funds, we'll be using that to fix those stations also. So our plan here is, in the next 3, 4, 5 months, is to get all these 18 stations up and running, so we can rest at night and not worry about people calling us every day and complaining about spills and overflows. We don't like them any more than anybody else does. This is just a list of our 67 pump stations showing the ages and all that. Hard to read. What I did here, though, is I put together a chart showing you when the pump stations were built. Back in 1920, we had two of those were the vacuum stations. 1940s, we had a little bit of a growth spurt during the war and after the war. The big growth spurt occurred in the 60s. That's when the city saw a big spurt in development, And this started to level off in the 70s, 80s. As we moved in the 90s and the 2000s, you can see a lot less activity in terms of the pump stations. What this is telling you is that a majority of the pump stations in the city are 50 years old or older, which means that they're either have reached their useful life or they are approaching their useful life, which is, we look at a pump station to be about 50 years as useful life. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're focusing on right now. We're focusing on getting the stations up and running, getting them more reliable, and so that we can maintain them for a number of years from now. This is not going to do a major fix on everything, but it's going to keep them running. This is just a picture of one of the pump stations. And you can see that this, the photo to the right shows you some of the condition that occurred back, say, around December. There's a pump missing, that sort of thing. We bought new pumps, they're on order. We're getting new work done on the controls. This station, Douglas Avenue, at one time we had a bypass. That green, orange thing you see in the background is a bypass pump. What you see in the foreground is what happens when the pump station fails. That's a sewage overflow. That's raw sewage that was flowing out into the alley and into the property of the pump station. That's not happening right now because of the measures we're taking. This is a fellow's house in the Port Norfolk area with which the Douglas Avenue pump station serves. This is what was happening to his house. We don't like it any better than he does, and that has not been occurring here recently. So these are things we deal with. These people call us. We don't tell them go away. We say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, we're going to be right on it. Yes, and try to explain to them. We call them back, tell them what the problem is, and they appreciate it. And they understand the issues that we're facing. Pump and haul. This is very expensive. This is something that's we've been dealing with for the last three and a half months. When the pump station goes down completely, we have to pump out of the wells. And you can see we're pumping out of that truck there. We pump the sewage into the truck. We take it to another part of the system where we can dump it, where we've got pump stations that are operating. That, we're seeing a significant decrease in the amount of pump and haul over the last month or so. And we're going to see even bigger decrease coming in a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks from now. We think that we've got that under control. We're still going to have some pump and haul because things are going to happen, but it's not going to be at the level that we've been dealing with. I mentioned the age of the materials earlier on the gravity system. A lot of this sewer pipes in the city are old terracotta pipe with old joints that have failed. What happens with the joint fails is it lets in water, you know, groundwater, that sort of thing. And along with the groundwater comes the soil material around it. And the soil material under the pavement goes into the pipe, and so the pavement fails. And so we estimate there's somewhere in excess of 1,000 of these in various states of failure around the city. We get to them when they get this bad, obviously. And most of the time when it gets this bad, it's going to require a major fix. That picture on the right shows you some of the things that we face when we dig up a pipe, what it looks like. That's an older cast iron pipe, quite deteriorated, because the gases and things in the system chew up the metal. The fix there on the left is a cave-in fix. It's a temporary fix. What we do when we do get a report of a cave-in, we go out, we fix it, we fill it full of gravel, put a temporary patch on it, and then we schedule a more, let's say, more of a permanent fix. We can do that with our city forces if it's shallow. If it's deep, we have to have our contractors do it. You can see on the right there is a picture of one of our contractors recently replacing a sewer pipe where we had on one street 5 major cave-ins. So these things happen. We had one happen today. We're addressing right now. Uh-oh, what did I get into here? That's not my slide, is it? No, that's not. Okay, so in summary, we've had some issues. We know about those issues. We're addressing those issues. We're using the money that was granted to us to work on the pump stations, get them up and running. We're also looking at other alternative funding. We're looking at grants. We've gotten 5 revolving loan funds for the sewer system repairs. We've got those projects from the state, and we're actively in the process of getting those up and running. We're looking at grants from the federal government. We're also looking at possibility of any other funding sources. We've had some, we got a grant just immediately, not even related to the infrastructure, for our lead and sewer, or excuse me, our lead removal program. So that's going to come down the line. So every opportunity, I'm working with James, every opportunity we can, we're out there looking for money to be able to fix the system. And so I might add just one more thing. You said the water system's aging too. Right now it's in better shape than the sewer system. We're concentrating more on the sewers. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Battle, sir, you have the floor. And
Is it difficult to change over to a gravity-driven system?
Are you saying in the place of a vacuum? Excuse me?
In place of the pumps, is it easier and less strenuously financially to change over to a gravity-driven system? I know the new systems now have very few pumps. It's gravity-driven.
In this area, because it's so flat, we have to have pump stations. And it really depends on the slope of the sewer, and there's certain, the state tells us what the slope has to be. And you get to a certain point where the pipe is too far away from the pump station to get that slope, so you need to put in a pump station. That's why we have so many in the city.
How long is the federal government giving us to replace pipes in the ground and to make the repairs that they change?
I
Are
bel-
they immediate, they want it done?
Mr. Battle, sir, could you turn your mic on? I think we can't hear you very well.
Are they giving
sir.
us years?
Yes, sir.
How many years do we?
It really relates to the program. I will say with the state, with the revolving loan funds, they like to see it from the point that you start the project to the point you finish it, 2 years. And the projects that we have right now, each of the 5 projects are less than a year. So
And the pipes in the ground?
if we get funding from the federal government, they give us a longer period of time. I believe that if we get infrastructure funds from the Infrastructure Act, it's, James, help me, 5 years? Yes, sir. 5 years, yes. So that from the time we start the project to the time we complete it, we have to spend the money in 5 years. So that's really our time period.
So we're putting together a plan to meet all of the obligations?
We're going after everything we can.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Lucas Burke, and then Vice Mayor Barnes, and then
Mayor.
Councilman Moody.
Thank you, sir, for the detailed presentation. It was very thorough. We were able to follow it really easily, and for the presentation that you did with the civic leagues last week. That information was very helpful as well. Regarding the pump and haul, is this a contracted company that the city uses, or do you just seek out and get one company to do that service when it's needed?
When we first realized that our pump and haul was going to be significant over the last 3 months, we did go out and look at 3 different companies, and we did get the one that had the lowest cost per hour.
Okay.
What they do is they price it on cost per hour for a location. So we did find the lowest cost company.
Okay,
And it was a company that has worked with us before.
sure, great.
So that's how we did that. It's emergency service.
Yes.
At this point, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I know that our citizens over in Port Norfolk are happy because we all received some emails regarding some of their issues that have been occurring, and we're glad to see that those have been repaired now.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Barnes, sir, you have the floor.
My question also deals with pumping and hauling. I was going to actually ask that question as well as how much does it cost for us to do the pumping and hauling monthly?
On a monthly? Okay. It depends on the month. Now, we had some good months. Beginning, let's say in December, our average cost per day, that's what I'm going to deal with, was about $5,000. When we got into January, it was 8. February was a bad month. Now, this doesn't mean that we pump every day, okay? It was $29,000 a day. You can do the average. The average is going to be somewhere around 15 to 20 if you look at that over the period of time. In March, we're back down to 7. This week, we're down to 5. 2 weeks, we should be down to a lot less than that. So we're seeing a lot of reduction in costs due to the fact that we're not having to pump in all these pump stations because they're back online. For a given, let's just kind of like, I got some numbers here. Let's say we've got something that has to be pumped for 10 hours, a manhole or something at $250 an hour. That's $2,500 a day just for that one manhole, okay?
So you have to say it again?
$2,500 a day just for one manhole for 10 hours. That's kind of give you a perspective of what the cost is. It's not cheap. That's why we want to get everything fixed so we don't have to do that at the frequency. And we are, like I said, seeing an improvement in the amount of that we're having to do.
So you're saying that in December, is that when we started in December?
In December, yes, sir.
And it was at $5,000 a day?
That was about $5,000 a day.
Which is roughly around $100,000 for the month.
Roughly, yes, sir. I have the numbers. Yes, sir. That is correct.
What from your numbers? How much have we spent on
Over
Harlem since December?
Over $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Whitaker, did you have a question, sir?
I'm gonna wait for Ms. Terry.
Okay, well, Councilman Moody then, sir, you have the floor.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
With the number of pump stations that we have offline, how do we prioritize which ones come back online? Is there a methodology to that, or is it complaint-driven? I know I get calls, I'm sure some of my colleagues do.
I'm sure.
Not only, and most of the calls I get are over noise, explain to me how we determine which ones come back online first.
There's 2 criteria here that we look at. First is the size. The 3 vacuum stations that went down, you can see, represent a very, very large portion of old Portsmouth. They also, not only the size of that, but also the number of overflows that are occurring in each of those systems. When we get to the more neighborhood, the smaller pump stations, the priority really is based on the number of overflows that are occurring, how frequently the pump station is going down on us, that sort of thing. Again, how large it is. So it's really a combination of the size of the station, the number of people it serves, and the overflows that are occurring because of it. Yeah.
What's the ballpark cost of getting one of the neighborhood stations back up and running, pump-wise? Just ballpark.
Ballpark, 50,000, 50 to 100,000 just to get it running. Okay, one of the smaller ones.
And how many do we have offline?
Offline right now we have 13. 15.
15?
Yes.
Or do we have the capacity to address all of those now to get them online? Or is that deferred?
Do we have the money? Is what
Yeah.
Yes. The combination of the ARPA funds and our operating fund, we feel that we do.
So is there any delay on parts or?
Sir, that is our biggest problem right now is getting parts. And we have gone to vendors that can expedite those parts, but there's still a big delay. For example, some of our larger pumps might take us 3 months to get.
Wow.
Okay. But we've ordered those back when this all began, so they're starting to come to us now.
My question's to the manager. Will that be covered as far as the service provided by Napa?
At
Those
this
type,
point,
parts?
at this point, we have not included those parts in the discussion,
Okay.
but it's not to say that they couldn't be. If we
I
find that
would-
that's in the best interest of the city, we will look at that, but at this point, we have not.
I would think we might want to look at it if it would be advantageous. Sounds like they can source about any part. Might be additional savings there. Thanks, nice presentation.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Councilman Woodard, did you want the floor, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Councilman Woodard, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How you doing? Nice presentation.
Thank you.
I got a question. Have this ever been a serious concern in the past of us replacing our sewer system?
Yes, sir, it has.
And what areas have we? Oops. Oh, so sorry, Siri. What areas have we worked on? Was it some older than other areas within the city?
As far as I know, some of the past projects were in areas, in the older areas like Prentice Park. We've got one project plan that we're trying to get funding from the state for Prentice Place. The older sections of the city are the ones we've been concentrating on. More recently, we're looking at, let's say, a street block or two where we have excessive cave-ins and that sort of thing, and those are being addressed over those 5 projects I mentioned that we got revolving loan funds for.
Right.
But primarily, it's the older sections. Downtown, we've had an ongoing project for the last 5 to 10 years in the downtown area, the Old Town area, if you would. That's approximately 50% complete. So primarily older sewers, the older sewers with the terracotta pipe, very, very leaky systems. As a consequence, lots of cave-ins.
Okay, and we're not repairing the terracotta pipes. We're just removing them and inserting new pipes to improve the system?
In some cases, we can line them. Depends on how bad off they are. In other cases, we have to replace them. So I would say it's a combination of the two.
Okay, and are we having any trouble early on with the supply of our water closer to the water treatment plants with those pipes?
We have had some leakages on some of our older transmission mains. One of them was put in the 20s, one in the 30s. Those are old cast iron pipes. We do get leaks in those. We go address them. We have to dig them up and put bands around them to stop the leaks. So we are seeing some problems. Not catastrophic failures though, like we're seeing in the sewer system.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Vice Mayor Barnes, sir, you have the floor.
And just for clarification purposes, when you say offline, could you define what that means?
Excuse me, sir?
When you say offline, we have 15 pump stations offline.
Offline, yes, that means they're not working. We've got bypass pumps on them right now.
Wow.
In other words, we hook up a pump to the wet well or the suction line and we discharge that with the bypass pump into the force main. So basically what we've got is a pump on the ground, not in the station, that's taking the sewage out of the pump station and putting it into the force main system.
That's the pumping and hauling?
No, sir, that is called bypass pumping.
Okay.
Bypass pumping is where you have a pump you can hook up to the station and then discharge into the force main system. There's no spillage involved there. The pumping and hauling is where you've got pump stations that are completely down and you have to go out into the system and pump from the manholes or the suction wells and carry that wastewater somewhere else where we've got a working pump station. So those are two different things.
And a citizen asked me this: if they start to smell sewage in their home, should they contact you guys regarding that?
They do. As a matter of fact, we have an emergency number that they call 393-8561. And that is on our webpage. If you open up our webpage, there's a button that you can see. You push that button for emergency service, and it gives you the number. It's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. So we get those calls. We have on-call crews that work at night on the weekends. So we are a 24-hour service.
And one more thing. Aside from smelling sewage, what are some of the things that we should look for to know you have a problem?
Couple of things. If you're smelling sewage, you've probably got there might be sewage coming out of the clean out at the edge of your property, or there might be sewage coming out of the clean out in your house. I would say that probably, it's probably 50-50. We go out there, we look at the problem. If it's not on the city side, we tell the property owner that they need to call a plumber because the problem is on their side. And that does happen, and we assist the property owners with that because a lot of the property owners, they don't understand how their sewers work, and they automatically assume that whatever's wrong with their sewer is the city's problem, and we do go out and assess it. We don't just tell them over the phone, hey, it might be your problem. We go out there, we meet with them, we show them, and we tell them, this is where it's coming from. We can't work on your property because we can only work on our city-owned facilities. So we do that. We did that today, just right before this meeting, as a matter of fact, with the property owner out in the Churchland area.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I get more compliments from the response time from people in your department that come out to address the overflows and blockages out in the street. Just wanted to pass that on.
Thanks, sir.
And also question, do we have any residential properties or businesses still on septic tanks?
We do. It's a low number. I would say it's less than 100, and they are scattered throughout the city.
I thought it was mandatory once the city ran sewage lines to hook up to those properties.
It is.
Why do we still have 100?
In some cases, it's grandfathered in.
So I didn't think it could be grandfathered in.
Well, I tell you, if we were really aggressive, in some cases, we don't have a sewer in front of their property. In that case, they have to have a septic tank. In other cases, I guess we could be more aggressive and require them to tie into our system.
So we still have some areas you think that sewer lines don't accommodate the neighborhoods?
There could be, sir, but I don't really know the number or the location of those. If you really need, I can
Yeah,
I can get that
at a
together
later
for you.
time. It'd be good to know why
Okay.
why we have the 100 still utilizing septic tanks.
I think it's less than 100, quite frankly. Yeah, we do have a list, and I can go back and take a look at that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Councilwoman Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question for the presentation. In looking at the gravity sewer system failures, and you said that the terracotta pipes are being replaced. What kind of material is being used to replace those?
We're putting them back with either PVC primarily, PVC pipe, plastic pipe that will last basically for a long time, longer than I will.
Great.
That's for sure.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Woodard, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just one last question. We appreciate the response times for our residents, but are we following up once we correct the problem and letting our citizens know that you know the problem has been corrected?
We do. We call them and tell them what we've done.
Okay.
And we make sure that they see us there too, and that the people that are out there talk to them and tell them what we're doing.
Mr. Underhill, thank you so much for your presentation, and
you,
thank
sir.
you and your department for the work you do in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Terry, Deputy City Manager.
Thank you. Okay. This portion is for fiscal feasibility. These are the current public utility capital projects that are in action now. The plan of action for addressing the sewer system, the water system, public utilities. So as Mr. Underhill explained before, that we were going after non-debt alternative resources to ensure that we receive or are able to continue to work, as well as cash We want to maintain our AA bond funding. We're using cash funds to do our smaller maintenance projects. And we're continually evaluating further water and sewer rate increases. Council, every year, there's a 5% increase that we do that has been approved. And we seek direction from council as we prioritize capital needs. So I wanted to speak pretty quickly on public utilities debt affordability so that we can stay on the same page. So as a point in time for June 30th, GO bonds, we were at 102 million and revenue bonds at 29 million. General obligation bonds and revenue bonds to do some of these projects. Revenue bonds are based on your rate. So basically, what they look at is how much money you're making on income, because this is considered business services. Your money comes in based on rate. There's a debt service coverage requirement of 1.15 times debt service. What that is basically how much money you have in revenue, and then you multiply that 1.15 to give you that room in between where you can add more or you can increase based on how much additional income you're going to get based on your revenue that you'll receive.
Excuse me, Ms. Terry.
Councilman,
In
Dr.
this
Whitaker, you
case,
have the floor.
that was my question dealing with this 1.5 times debt service figure. So when you're saying revenue, is that revenue strictly what public utilities is bringing in, or the total revenue of the city?
Revenue with public utilities,
public.
because it's a separate activity than governmental. Because with public utilities, you charge a rate.
Okay.
Debt previously authorized by city council but not issued of 166 million. Debt issue plan for June 22. If we were deciding that we had to go after a bond to fund some of these projects, it would be a $30 million bond. And that's where we were looking at debt service. So current unissued debt cannot be issued in full because coverage will not be met. Basically, that's pretty much saying 166 million is what you still have outstanding. You've authorized these projects, but you need 166 million to complete them. So we don't have the capacity to go after a $166 million bond without crippling the city financially. Evaluate further water and sewer rate increases as we continue again with the sewer rate increase of 5% that was supposed to sustain us as we continue to move forward. But with the infrastructure that we have failing in maintenance, we can't just rely on that 5% increase. We have to look at some additional increases if we want to continue.
Go ahead, sir, and then I'll go after you. Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor.
So where does the infrastructure bill funds fit into this equation? I noticed that ARPA is mentioned, but what about infrastructure?
So where we are now is we're waiting for that to come. Mr. Wright identified the categories that it would allow us to spend, but again, we're waiting for the final resolution on that before making a determination. So we're hopeful. We still have plenty needs if it comes, but we want to leverage our resources as we have it currently.
So with that infrastructure bill funds, is that capped at a certain amount per city, or is that just a matter of applying? How is that working?
James is
think
going to
it's
come
based
to
on the
speak to
need.
that.
So, Dr. Whitaker, there's no cap per city. Each agency has a certain amount of spend per year over the 5-year period that the law is good for. And then those funds are available until they're spent.
Each federal agency?
So each agency that get those funds. So say funds for a specific program goes to DEQ. The funds that they have in that program are split between those 5 years, and they're available until they're spent. So if you're in the state of Virginia, any locality in the state of Virginia has the ability to apply for that program at DEQ for those available funds based on the requirements. If your project requirements line up with basically that program. I think we have a meeting this week, if I'm not mistaken, with one of the consultants and Department of Health to talk about a couple of projects that Public Utilities wants to do to get in line for the funding opportunity that's available in April and in May. As the city manager mentioned, through Congressman Scott's office, we got actual earmark from the federal government for, I think, $500,000 for to get started with our program for the lead and copper roll. So we're aggressively going after these funds when they become available. So each agency that gets the funds will have a notice of available funding. They'll put that out to give you, the localities, states, whoever, an idea that, hey, we've got a pot of money available. It's going to become available at this date. This is your deadline that you're going to have to get an application in. You look at it, see if you have a project that fits it, get with your team, put together an application and get it submitted, and hopefully things work out in your favor.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I do have one question. I just wanted to be clear. When you indicated that in order to pay for additional debt, we would have to, you said something about a rate increase. That means, would that be the rates that we charge our citizens would have to increase to cover additional debt service? Is that what you were meaning?
So basically, yes and yes. So right now, we have factored into the budget a 5% increase that would have been, or is to cover some of these costs. But again, as we know, post-pandemic,
And isn't that an ongoing cost? I think, isn't that written into kind of our policy?
Right.
That 5% every year is an ongoing cost to prepare for expected,
to catch up
right.
because we were far behind.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Well, Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. It was my understanding that rate increase structure was put together for the water operation to bring that up to the mandated standards. Might want to look into that. I think that was, if my memory is correct, that's what that rate increase was supposed to offset. It's been a couple years, but just might want to look into that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Battle, sir, you have the floor.
So you're saying that we've retroactively passed that the water bills or the water or some portion of city taxes will go up 5% each year? Is that
That's the rate increase that council agreed to during at some point of a budget session.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
And Madam City Manager, would you proceed, please?
For the city manager report backs summaries. The first one, 22-84, $11.9 million is to reappropriate PPS FY 2021 unexpended grant funds to FY 2022 PPS grant fund budget, increasing the FY 22 grant fund appropriation from $21.4 million to $33.4 million. 22-85 is $21.6 thousand. It's developmental disability residential support funding. This is one-time funding intended to provide support for individuals diagnosed with an intellectual or developmental disability. $155,000 for community development block grant program income. This is to accept income generated by the sale of land, which will be used to support activities in the existing fiscal year 20 22 Annual Action Plan. 22-87 is the Finance Personal Property Tax Relief. This is to propose a one-time, this was discussed during the Commissioner of Revenue's presentation when he mentioned the increases. This is a one-time personal property tax relief, PPTRA, for qualifying taxpayers in order to provide a relief credit of 45% effective January 1, 2022 calendar year on personal property tax bills. The companion action is 22-88, which is the Commissioner of Revenue automobile and small truck assessment ratio for the calendar year 2022. This is to propose a one-time ratio reduction relief to be applied to personal property assessed values of automobile and small truck assessments to thereby reduce the taxes paid, which will provide a relief to citizens due to the impact of COVID-19 and the substantially appreciated values proposed by the National Automobile Dealer Association Pricing Guide. The next item, 22-89, is a memorandum of agreement with Chesapeake for fiber optic infrastructure exchange, use, and maintenance. This is to propose a resolution adoption authorizing mutual limited occupancy of right-of-way and a limited fiber strand exchange. The proposed agreement will allow Portsmouth and Chesapeake to mutually occupy each other's right-of-way at specifically listed locations along the borders within encroachment concerns on the other jurisdiction. The City of Chesapeake is set to take action on April 12th. Are there any questions?
No, ma'am. And we've now come to, you have a question, sir?
Yeah.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
What do you mean by the mutual agreement with Chesapeake to share? What are you saying?
Along the borders, we will use their strands along the borders, and they will use ours in terms of our fiber optic.
Is this an equal?
Yes,
Okay.
it's the same for both. We benefit, they benefit.
I mean, but the same amount of benefit?
Yes.
We have now come to city liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports? Seeing none, we do have a need for a closed session, but we're close to our time. So what I'd like to do with a consensus to move the closed session to our next meeting.
Can we take care of it this evening? I just want to I don't think it'll be long.
Oh, if it is the consensus of council to, after the regular meeting, to have the closed session, then we could do that. Can I get a consensus of that?
Can we do it within this time frame? I think it's not a long.
We have 10 minutes, sir.
Yeah, if it's okay with council, can we do it within this 10-minute break?
If we can do it within 10 minutes, I'm in agreement that, but however, we still need a consensus to go into closed session. So at this time, I would ask my colleagues of council, all who wish to go into a closed session,
We'll
could
have to
you?
make a motion.
But we need a consensus before we make the motion.
No, we don't. It's
In the proper order, sir, when the information was submitted, it was a request. If there are no objections
no
from
problem,
council.
no problem.
So we need a consensus in order to go into closed session. Do we have a consensus of 4 in order to go into closed session? Having seen the consensus, would you please read the motion for a closed session?
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711 8.3 for the purpose of discussing the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically regarding 700 Crawford Street.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Battle? Mr. Battle? Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Mr. Moody? Yes. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes, we're in closed session. We need to read the certification to come out of closed?
Yes, sir.
I hereby move that each council member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from an open meeting requirement under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Battle?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes, we're out of close. And let's take a 5-minute break for recess, and we will reconvene at 7:05 per the clock in the back of the room. Thank you.